Hey, friends! Just so you know, we enjoy the swear word and we rely on good old fashioned humor to get through some seriously dark subject matter. At no time do we intend any disrespect toward the victims or families of the victims in the cases we cover. Also, be sure to listen to the end for a few palate cleansing bloopers to reset your mindset. And with that, we thank you for listening and we hope you enjoy. Hey, friends! Welcome to Crime Will Tell. Carrie here, ready to tell Jami over there
Hey.
about today's extremely well known murder case. If you've been listening for a while, you know our preference is to give voice to the victims that have been forgotten, victims that are disenfranchised, and to absolutely talk shit about the perps. Today's perp is a woman at the center of one of the cases that first piqued my interest in true crime. And that woman's name is Betty Broderick.
Oh, shit. Good old Betty.
This case is highly well known. Lots of podcast episodes, lots of documentaries, books, movies, psychological dissections, all of the things. And this case is complex. There are loads of details. So, LP, you'll want to pay attention here because if you're not familiar with this, you might get lost in it. So, are you ready to get into this?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember this case?
I do. It's not one that I've ever dug super into. I'm kind of familiar with the details, but I'll definitely need a refresher. So this will be good.
Yeah, we'll do a refresher. This isn't going to be a Betty Broderick was born in 1946 on November 9th. It's not going to be like that. We're going to revisit this case, but really, this is one of the case. She made headlines recently, so that's why I'm doing this because I was like, oh, okay. Betty fucking Broderick, I forgot about you. You've been in jail this whole time, and then you died. So I'm pairing this. Yeah, she died. She is fucking dead. I'm pairing this afternoon's case discussion with a lovely ranch water. I'm taking a page out of your book. Yeah.
All right.
What do you have over there?
Delicious.
What are you doing?
Well, once again, we're recording during the day and I have to work this evening. So I am drinking a Corona NA because I felt like a beer sounded really good, but I'm a responsible
But you're
employee.
being responsible. Yeah, you are a responsible employee.
So,
well, I'm not. I am day drinking. So cheers, my friend.
Cheers to you. Clink.
Clink. Okay, so like I said, Betty Broderick recently made headlines again. She died. She died at the age of 78 on the 8th of May of this year. So we're recording on July 31st, Friday. So, I don't know, a couple months ago. I can't count. Math is hard. Girl went to prison when she was 42 years old.
Wow.
She spent 36 years behind bars.
Damn. I didn't realize that this case was that old.
Yes. When Betty was arrested on the 5th of November, 1989, she had 4 children. Daughters Kim and Lee, ages 19 and 18 respectively at the time, and sons Dan Jr. and Rhett, I love that name, who were aged 13 and 10 respectively at the time. So Dan Jr. was 13, Rhett was 10. So think about that. These kids lost both parents overnight in tragic and horrifyingly salacious fashion. How surreal that must have been. And then to think about it, here you are almost 4 decades later, and she's still one of the most notorious crimes that has ever happened here in the United States.
Right.
So let me do a quick overview of Betty's crime. If you're like me and you can rewatch the same episode of almost anything multiple times like it's the first time because you don't retain shit, this will be a helpful overview because it's easy to forget. In the early morning hours of the 5th of November, 1989, using the house key, she stole from her eldest daughter Kim's purse. Betty left her home on Hancock Street in San Diego and drove the approximate, no, she did not. She drove the approximate 3 miles to her ex-husband and his new wife's home on Cypress Avenue. Around 5 a.m., Betty let herself into Dan and Linda's home with Kim's key that she stole, and with the gun she purchased well beforehand, walked directly to the stairs to the second floor where Dan and Linda's bedroom was. Holding her pretty little 38 caliber 5-shot handgun in her right hand, Betty opened the door and found both of them sound asleep because it was 5 a.m.
Right.
There is no evidence of any struggle. There was no defensive wound on either body. So it is firmly established and verified that both Dan and Linda were attacked while they slept. But it is also firmly established and verified that they both awoke during the attack and were fully aware of what was happening before they died. From here, Betty's actions are dead nuts cold. She shot 5 times in total because that's all her gun would do. She emptied it. So she went into that bedroom and she emptied her handgun into Dan and Linda. She targeted Linda first, shooting her once, killing her pretty quickly, but not before Linda woke up, realized what was happening, and reached for the phone to call 911. Unfortunately, Linda died before the call connected. She still had the phone in her hand. Then Betty swung the gun toward Dan, shooting him twice. By this time, Dan had woken up and was attempting to get out of bed, fell to the floor near the bed, where he basically had died almost immediately. So he woke up, tried to launch himself, was shot twice, and basically died on the side of the bed.
Oh my God, that is like just one of those things that, like, just to be woken up, startled, not even able to get your bearings, seeing your spouse dead, like just so many things.
Yeah. And having like 0.2 seconds to comprehend everything that's going on.
Right. Yeah.
The other 2 shots Betty took missed. One lodged itself in one of the bedroom walls. The other one was like a ricochet somewhere. Betty didn't stick around. She certainly didn't clean up any evidence. She left quickly. She got into her car and she drove away. That was it. She went in, she shot up the place, and then she left. And at some point after the shooting that morning, Betty called her eldest daughter, Kim, and told her, quote, "I shot the son of a bitch."
Whoa, cold.
A small side note here. It was known that Betty had recently purchased herself that lovely little 38 caliber handgun. This fact was known, and this fact worried Linda, Dan's new wife. Yeah. Dan and Linda had actually tied the knot just months before in April 1989. So remember, this was on the 5th of November, 1989. 6 months prior in April, Dan and Linda had actually tied the knot. Linda was so worried about Dan's safety, knowing that Betty now had a gun, and given Betty's previous behavior and actions up to that point, Linda tried to convince Dan to wear a bulletproof vest under his tux at their wedding.
Aww.
Can you imagine being Linda, getting ready to walk down the aisle to the love of your life with this like nagging fingers crossed hope, like, Jesus Christ, I hope my husband to be doesn't get assassinated today.
Fear that your wedding might become a massacre. Oh my God, that's awful.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Dan wasn't a Mr. Sainty Saint either, because a big piece to Betty's behavior was the explosive scuttlebutt of Dan screwing around with Linda behind Betty's back when Betty and Dan were still very much married. In 1983, when Dan and Betty were still married, Dan decided to start up a torrid love affair with 21-year-old Linda Kolkena, his law firm's new secretary and legal assistant. Dan hired Linda with literally no legal or secretarial skill, including the all-important typing skill, and Betty was not very happy about this. It wasn't until 2 years later, in 1985, that Dan filed for divorce from Betty, his affair with Linda raging on, and to Betty, the reason why Dan didn't want to be married to Betty anymore. Linda was the problem.
Jeez.
Yeah. So shit definitely wasn't pretty in the Broderick marriage by the time Dan hired Linda in 1983. Dan had already checked out, I speculate, because who the hell knows what the truth actually was? Everybody directly involved is dead now. But what I speculate is Dan hired Linda because she was gorgeous and because he was attracted to her and because she would be a super fun distraction from his grumpy bear wife, Betty. That's what made this super contentious between Betty and Dan was Betty's increasing suspicion and Dan's increasing denials. So Betty saw it for what it was. Dan was like, "You're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about," making her feel like she's losing her mind. So basically, Betty was like, "You're fucking around. I know it." He's like, "No, I'm not." And it just got real contentious over the years.
Gaslighting the shit out of her.
Yep. Betty became sus when Dan hired Linda, even though it was obvious Linda had no relatable skills. But then she overheard Dan call Linda beautiful at a party they were attending. Then she learned Dan had promoted Linda pretty quickly to his personal legal assistant.
Oh my God. She's like, I can sit up and I can write words.
And I can fog a mirror. Then Betty noticed that Linda had become ingrained around Dan. Basically, wherever Dan was, Linda was. I think eventually it got to the point where Dan just didn't give a shit anymore and stopped trying to hide or deny.
Right.
And I also speculate that this was the beginning of the actual end for Betty. I wonder if something in her brain, I don't know, something in her brain like snapped or something, like a new neural pathway sparked to life. And she just ended up making so many fucking trips up and down this new pathway that she became completely unable to see outside of it. And her jealousy turned into obsession and hatred, just a boiling obsession and hatred. And she just wasn't able to get out of her own way anymore. That's the only thing I could think of as somebody who can't see past their own red. And they just can't, logic no longer applies.
Right. And I think like, I mean, I know I've had times where a relationship has ended or, you know, things aren't good and you just kind of, you do things that you normally wouldn't. Like emotions make you do things, react quicker than you normally would. You don't like think through as much and you just kind of can't get out of your own way and just like sometimes it leads to really stupid decisions. And
I agree. And you're not thinking clearly because you're stuck in your emotional system, and so you can't even get to your logic system. So the decisions you are making it's almost like a transition. Like you get stuck, and from logical thinking to this one way irrational thinking. That's the piece that fascinated me when I was 13. Even when I wasn't smart enough to know what that was. But in my 13-year-old brain, it translated more like, whoa, she went from being like a normal mom to a crazy fucking killer. And how does that happen all of a sudden in the brain? Now, I know it wasn't sudden. It took years for this new neural pathway to become like a superhighway in Betty's brain to the exclusion of all other rational and longer term thought. But at the end of the day, she went from logic to no longer having the ability to logic. You know what I mean? And then she, for the rest of her life, was like she was all in on this obsession. She was always the victim. Now, I think there's other things going on that we'll talk about. But anyway, when we come back, we'll discuss what Betty's legal team attempted to do during both of her trials.
Okay.
So there is video of Betty on the stand during her first trial, taking the jury through the murder. Court TV has done a great job preserving the original trial testimony. So really, you can just go out there and Google it. And honestly, it's a bit wild watching her try to convince the jury that she was driven to this like catastrophic conclusion after years of domestic abuse by her ex-husband, Daniel Broderick. The crux of her defense was basically battered wife syndrome, followed by a very contentious divorce and custody battle that raged on for several years. Betty's legal team all along was like, oh, yeah, there's no question she offed Dan and Linda. But Dan made her do it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Their argument was that years of marital warfare had led to Betty's psychological erosion. Meaning Dan turned Betty crazy.
Right. Ugh.
Her unstable mental status had been clearly documented by various mental health professionals throughout all the divorce and custody hearings. So her instability was not invented purely for her criminal trial. That was fact. She was definitely rocked by everything emotional and mental that had transpired between her and Dan. But the bottom line was Betty's legal defense was angling for a manslaughter conviction over intentional homicide. That was the crux of it. Their argument was that the shootings were the explosive end of a long emotional breakdown at the hands of Dan and not a cold, calculated execution.
Wow. Okay.
This is a piece of this entire case that I struggled with when I was 13. I didn't know it, but I was grappling with the idea of accountability. And looking back, was Betty accountable for Betty's actions, or was Dan accountable for Betty's actions? What's interesting is during Betty's criminal trials, Kim, her eldest daughter, testified that Betty discussed killing Dan with her before the shootings, saying,
Can
quote,
you imagine?
she said, I know, saying, quote, she said, she being Betty, quote, I'm going to kill the son of a bitch. And later testified, Kim being the person who later testified, that after Betty was arrested, Kim asked her mother why she shot Dan and Linda. And Betty responded, quote, my choice was to kill them or kill myself, and I couldn't let him win, end quote. Holy shit. Like,
that's intense.
Like her whole life, Betty's whole life just came down to it's either me or them.
And I'm not going to lose.
And I'm not going to lose.
That means murder. Wow.
They got to die. Mm-hmm. Betty's first criminal trial lasted about 7 weeks and ended in a mistrial. Can you believe it?
No.
The jury was deadlocked specifically because 2 of the 12 jurors refused to convict her of murder, insisting instead on manslaughter. They had absolutely bought the defense's argument of Betty's unstable mental state due to years of emotional turmoil and psychological deterioration.
Wow. Okay.
These 2 jurors felt that Betty killed in the heat of passion rather than premeditatedly. Since the state of California, where her trials took place, requires unanimous verdicts in criminal trials, the deadlocked jury forced the judge to declare a mistrial.
That's so interesting because it's like I could get behind that a little bit more if it was just like a spur of the moment thing, not a I'm going to steal this key, I bought a gun, I'm going to go over there in the middle of the night. Like that is calculated as fuck.
Yes.
It's so hard.
It's a logical sequence of events. It's an illogical logical sequence of events that led to Dan and Linda's deaths, right? Wow. And they were all initiated and perpetuated by Betty. Yeah. So, boy, when I was 13, that is where I was like, what is happening with the human condition? Like in my 13-year-old super hyped up hormone brain. In 1991, Betty's second trial got underway, lasting about 7 weeks, similar to the first trial. This time, though, there was a unanimous decision, guilty on 2 counts of second-degree murder. So she didn't get first degree. So they didn't get her on that. They didn't get her on premeditation, but she did get guilty on 2 counts of second-degree murder, which gave her a sentence of 32 years to life. Okay. Now, in California, inmates must serve the full number of calendar years for which they are sentenced before they are eligible for parole. So in Betty's case, she would have had to serve 32 full calendar years before she was first eligible to petition for parole.
Oh, okay.
California also credits pre-sentence custody time toward the minimum term. So Betty already had some bank jail time, a couple of years by this point. That helped her a little bit. But this math exercise basically puts Betty's first parole eligibility date to be the 5th of November, 2021. Doesn't that put that into perspective? Like 2021 wasn't that long ago.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy.
However, what I find really interesting, but not interesting enough to actually dive into the legalities of it, I just found it interesting enough to make mention of it, is that Betty actually applied for parole 3 separate times before she was actually legally eligible.
What?
I don't understand this, but again, I didn't care enough to investigate the legality behind it. But suffice it to say, she applied in 2010, 2011, and 2017. And all 3 times, she was denied parole for the same reasons. She consistently refused to accept responsibility or accountability for her actions and behaviors. She showed absolutely no remorse for Dan and Linda's deaths. And she continued to justify her actions and behaviors as being the result of Dan's alleged abuse. Again, of which there was no verifiable evidence or witness of.
Were they also like, hey, bitch, you can't apply for parole for another decade? Maybe stop? Like,
I don't
you're
know.
wasting resources
I don't know.
and time.
Right?
It's so
That's why
weird.
I was like, I don't know if they just, I don't know if there was even any time on it. I don't know if she applied and they were like, no. She applied, they were like, no. She applied. You know what I mean? The parole board determined she remained a public safety risk, and basically all 3 times they said, nope. The 4th and last time she applied for parole was in 2021, shortly after she became officially eligible on the 5th of November. Though I do believe this was an automatic parole review by the parole board. I think when you become, I'm not sure, but I got the impression that at least in Betty's situation in the state of California at the time, when she was first legally eligible for parole, it was an automatic eligibility for parole that she was put into. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
But again, she was denied for the same reasons. Now, what I want to talk about is the kids. Not so much that we invade their privacy, because these 4 kids have had a time of it. They lost their father and stepmother in dramatic, horrifying fashion back in 1989. Their mother did it, and she went to prison for the rest of their lives. And then she just died at the age of 78 this past May. And so they lost their mother this past May, which reopened all of these old wounds because her death was reported, which brought her name back into the headlines.
Right.
So I don't really want to get too much into the kids, but what I do want to talk about is their support or lack thereof, or their stance related to their mom and what she did.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious if any of them like supported her.
Yeah, because they were so young at the time, and now they are all much older than she was when she committed these crimes.
Wow.
So I was like, that was the piece I was also fascinated about when I was 13. Like, she was a mom. Mommies don't do that. What about these kids? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Moms fix things.
Yeah, they kiss your boo-boos. They don't create them. Anyway, throughout all of these parole denials, Betty's 4 children remained decidedly split with each other. Her 2 oldest children, her daughters Kim and Lee, were against Betty's release. They told the parole board that Betty was still angry, manipulative, and unrepentant, and their biggest fear was that she would harm others if she were ever released from prison. Wow. Her 2 youngest children, her sons Dan Jr. and Rhett, supported her release from prison. They felt she had served enough time and should be allowed to live out the rest of her natural life outside prison walls. Bottom line, what ended up happening was the parole board weighed the opposition from Kim and Lee, along with Betty's own lack of accountability and remorse, as too heavy a risk to grant Betty freedom. And that is where Betty remained. She stayed in the California Institute for Women in Chino, California for the next 36 years. I was 14 when she was incarcerated.
Wow.
14. Every day I have lived since then, every experience, every memory, every event, my entire life since the age of 14, she spent at CIW, California Institute of Women, which leaves me asking, was it worth it?
I have a feeling she felt very satisfied knowing that they were no longer alive. I feel like she probably just
Oh, that's an interesting perspective I hadn't thought of before. That to her, all those decades that she was incarcerated, every day that she woke up, she was still happy that they were fucking dead.
Yeah, I think
I
in
bet
her
you're
mind
right.
she was like, I won. They didn't win.
I bet you're right.
Which is probably what the parole board saw. Because I mean, if she wasn't taking ownership and going, I recognize now that I did not handle that correctly. I was caught up in my emotions and whatever. And like her daughters must have seen that and just been like, Mom is
Bananas.
She's very, like, still very okay with what she did with taking 2 lives.
That's a really good point. Maybe her 36 years in prison weren't all that bad then because she was happy. I don't know. In April of this year, in April of 2026, Betty fell and seriously injured herself, breaking several of her ribs in that fall. Unfortunately, her condition deteriorated pretty quickly. She ended up developing a sepsis infection that led to her being taken to the Chino Valley Medical Center in Chino, California. They transported her there on the 18th of April, where she was placed in ICU.
Wow.
Her condition just continued to deteriorate, and she was eventually, for a brief period of time, put on life support before they finally called it. 3 weeks later, on the 8th of May, 2026, Betty died. Her official cause of death, per the San Bernardino County Coroner's autopsy report, was, quote, septic infection resulting from multiple broken ribs sustained in a prison fall. Her manner of death was ruled accidental. The coroner ruled her death was not natural, but the result of complications from that fall that she had suffered. I kind of chuckled a little bit, not because it was hilarious, but the irony of it was that her final official cause of death is septic infection resulting from multiple broken ribs sustained in a prison fall. So even her cause of death is wrapped in prison. Like the rest of her life was defined, and her death was defined by her being in prison.
Yeah.
Just the whole thing, like, what is the, it's kind of a weird death. You don't use, I mean, septic infection isn't like rampant, but it's not uncommon. We know what it is. People die from it, but interesting that I wonder if she had other like comorbid conditions or something. She must not have been in very good immune health if she was so susceptible. Do you know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, it's also funny that they included the word prison. Like it was important because it's like you don't hear like from a living room fall or a bathroom fall. You know what I mean? Like they don't put it's like always such a very vague, just short description, but it was like in a prison fall.
No, let me tell you what this happened, all right?
This bitch was an inmate.
This bitch, she was a prisoner. Okay.
Wow, she was a clumsy prisoner.
Yeah, she fucking fell. She broke her ribs. But she was in prison when she did it, y'all. It wasn't a living room. It wasn't a bedroom. It's front porch. Yeah. It's prison.
Right. Front porch.
While I do not have a PhD in narcissistology, I am a podcaster, so therefore I know nothing and I have a microphone. But I wonder if Betty was a narcissist. I don't know. Probably. I wonder. It's telling to me that in no point in 36 fucking years did she ever apologize or verbalize regret or sorrow or suggest she felt any ounce of guilt for taking away her children's father.
Right.
For giving
that's the piece
that single, yes.
That like even just if she could just say that.
Never.
Obviously she never was glad that she did it, but if she just was like, I hate that, like I hurt my children.
Not one letter was ever reported that she ever verbalized regret or sorrow, or that she ever gave like a single pre-trigger pulling thought to her 4 children and the impact those actions would leave on them. She never wavered from her stance as a victim. She consistently blamed Dan for her actions. Maybe it wasn't narcissist. Maybe it was that obsessive neural superhighway she carved her. I don't know. But jealousy, spite, hate changes people. Like that changed her irrevocably for the rest of her life. And that hate, that vitriol that she held for Dan and that happy life he found with Linda, like that changed her. Do you know anything about borderline personality disorder?
Not
Maybe
really.
that's what plagued her.
Yeah.
I don't know, but was she fine until somehow, some way her brain just allowed her to just fall into this obsession that she had? Or did she already have some underlying mental health thing that was exacerbated as a result of this?
Yeah. Yeah, I have a feeling like in a lot of cases that there's an egg inside of everybody that like can hold these really bizarre behaviors and reactions to things, and sometimes circumstances and situations can crack that egg open and bring those things to life. And that maybe that was just kind of always inside of her, and this caused it to break open, and that became like her fixation. Or maybe some people just are never capable of going to those levels. I don't know, but it's fascinating.
I don't know either. It is fascinating. And while Dan is a victim here, hard stop, he is a victim here. He's also an asshole. Like,
correct.
Both things can be true at the same time. He should have ended his marriage to Betty before he started up anything with Linda. But infidelity never justifies murder. Ever,
Right.
ever, ever. So what of the Broderick children present day? They are divided in their opinions of their mother, still to this day.
Okay.
But they never, ever allowed that division to sever their family ties.
Oh, good.
All 4 were at Betty's bedside for several weeks before she died in May, and all 4 were present when she finally passed.
Wow.
For the most part, throughout the years, Kim and Dan Jr. were aligned with each other.
Oh.
They did not support Betty's release from prison. Lee and Rhett were more sympathetic to Betty. They supported her release. However, it is interesting to note that at the 4th and final parole hearing in November 2021, Lee and Dan Jr. switched places. Lee was the second oldest daughter. Dan Jr. was the oldest son. Lee was firmly with Kim in opposing Betty's release for many years, while Dan Jr. and Rhett were collectively more supportive. No idea what changed for Lee or Dan Jr. Highlights just how impactful the passage of time can be on thoughts and feelings, but suffice it to say, they kind of flipped. And so then Dan Jr. and Kim were really opposed to Betty being released, and Lee became more sympathetic towards Betty, along with Rhett. So another tidbit that struck me as interesting, Rhett, he was the youngest of the siblings. He was 10 at the time of his father and stepmother's deaths. He has always maintained a sympathetic position toward Betty. At her first parole hearing in 2010, Rhett strongly supported her release. By this time, she had served more than 20 of her 32-year-to-life sentence, saying she was, quote, a nice lady and, quote, not a danger since the only people she harmed were already dead. To which I say, until she finds the next person she has to harm because they drove her to it. Right. But I bring this up to say, when Rhett was 10, he was probably, him and Dan Jr., who was 13, were probably the most influential ages, right? Because Lee and Kim were already in 18 and 19 respectively, but that was their mommy. Rhett was so young, he couldn't possibly have emotionally understood the gravity of what this was. So to hear him say what he said, I'm not surprised about that. And it saddens me because it's that 10-year-old boy that I'm hearing in that.
Right.
The
Yeah, I mean, he
naivety.
was still just a little kid, you know, like
Oh
the
my
other,
gosh.
especially
Yes.
the girls, they were older and they were able to pick up on their mom's behavior and the
Yep.
horrible things that she was probably saying about their father, and just probably more aware of what was going on and how unhinged she was becoming. But Rhett was just a little boy who probably still just loved to snuggle up next to his mom. He didn't see that in her. He just saw
Yep.
his mother, not the devious ex-wife and the bitterness and all
Yeah.
that. So he just lost, like, he missed his
He just
mom. That
lost
was
his
it.
mommy. I know.
Ugh. Mm.
And that is the case of Betty Broderick and her life decisions. Her recent death reminded me of how she had like captured my attention back in 1989. And that is what helped spark my interest in true crime and reminded me that all this time she had still been in prison, all this time, and never apologized for it ever.
Yeah,
It's
that's
fascinating.
crazy. Like, it's interesting that the two girls were older and they didn't end up having much sympathy for their mother. And then the two boys were younger. It's like, okay, so obviously the ages factored. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if the boys were older and the girls were younger, if it was the same dynamic, or if like the males and females had like different takeaways from everything that went on. Like, I wonder how much of it was like gender and or age, or both of them. Like, if it had been a mix of
Mm,
ages, like if it had been a different story, like if Rhett
yeah.
was 18 instead of 10, how his perspective of, you know, what all went down would have changed. So it's just kind of interesting to see where they ended up as far as their beliefs
Mm-hmm.
and their support, and
Yeah.
like what determined that.
The other thing I was thinking was the kind of relationship Betty had with them as a mother. Was it confrontational with the girls and more of mommy's boys with the boys? Was it, you know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, because if Rhett was older instead of being 10, and it was his key that got taken to that she used to go kill his father, if he would have been like, oh, you know, let's release mom, or if he would have been kind of like, how dare you put me in that position, like the older girls were. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
just,
And I don't know how Kim ever felt about the fact that her mom stole her key to her father's house out of her purse to do
yeah.
this. Like,
It's like
I
she
don't know how she ever
kind of
felt
made
about
her an
that.
accomplice, like in a very, like, not really, but you know what I
Oh,
mean? It's
yeah.
like, you,
Dragged her into it,
yeah,
certainly. And then she called Kim afterwards and said, I shot the son of a bitch.
yeah.
Like, that's a
Just
lot to
killed
put
your
on your
dad.
daughter. Yes. Can you, like, what in the actual, like, that blew my, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Those poor kids, the Broderick children have definitely, they got shafted
Right, yeah.
with what Betty
Man,
did to them.
so sad.
If you found this episode compelling, please share with others. Hit that subscribe button for our YouTube channel. With that, goodbye, James.
Goodbye, Carrie.
Okay. Mm.
You could have done better than that. That's all you have.
I was just taken over by an entity.
Just kidding, it's coffee.
Hi, Mom and Dad. You guys are old.
Are you okay?
I am okay.
Get a room. Wait, what?
Hello.
Wait, what the fuck happened?
Lost in the way.